So we're here this morning to hear a preliminary results from Seungyong's thesis. So his you see his name here. You see most students here around here call him SY because they don't want to try to pronounce Seungyong. Okay, so he's completed about 90% of his work here on his thesis, and so he's going to give you some results that we have found today. And we still have a little bit of analysis to do, and then a whole lot of writing yet. So we still have some work to do on that. So I think one of the things that other faculty in the group would agree with me is that one of the real pluses in our job is to get a chance to observe the growth in students that occur when they start here with a kind of a wide-eyed deer in the headlights type look. And by the way, I've learned that when I use these little sayings, deer in the headlights, I have to translate them for Seungyong up here. They don't use the same sayings in Seoul, South Korea, okay? But so I might have to translate deer in the headlights for some of you. Is that right? Yeah, I'm not sure you all would understand it. But so it certainly is a pleasure to introduce Seungyong today. He's come a long way, okay? And I think that not only in his classwork, but observing him during the course of this thesis, he's stepped up a lot and showed some maturity and growth as a result of working on this project. So something for some of you first years especially to think about if you're going to be doing a thesis project. It is a little bit of a daunting task, but I think the road is well worth it once you get to the final part of it. So I'm going to let Seungyong talk to you about this today, and I would remind you that probably only On in here can appreciate the difficulties with presenting a talk in a second language, and Seungyong is doing that today. So if there are times that there are some words you don't understand, we may have to stop him and get him to work on his enunciation, as I tell him all the time. Okay, so just please forgive him, and we'll get through it one way or the other. Okay.
Thank you for that, GS, for a great introduction for me, and he already used my 3 minutes. And I also thank you, Dr. Gracie, for having me in this exercise science seminar series. And I'm really glad to be here and to present my master's thesis entitled The Effect of Acute Beetroot Juice Supplementation on Muscle Fatigue in Knee Extensor Exercise. As Dr. Ye said before, this study is still working on, and I'm still analyzing my one little data. So today is mostly the introduction and method, and a little bit of result part will be presented in today's presentation. And I'm pretty much sure everybody knows which is this vegetable, beetroot, and this is how exactly it looks like the beetroot juice is. So why I conduct this study with beetroot juice and what's in beetroot juice? So primarily, the major factor and critical point in beetroot juice is nitrate, which is NO3. Nitrate is one of a family of compounds containing nitrogen and oxygen, which can be found in both our normal diet and it can be produced by our body itself. So in endogenous pathway, the nitrate is known as byproduct of nitric oxide oxidation. And exogenous pathway, we can usually consume the dietary vegetables as a nitrate consumption. So yeah, this is how the beetroot juice just looks like. So why is nitrate in beetroot juice important? This is because the inorganic dietary nitrate in beetroot juice or other green leafy vegetable source is a possible source for generation of nitric oxide. Nitric oxides are also known as they have beneficial effect of human physiologic functions. So Also, nitric oxide can produce in human body itself in endogenous pathway, which can call classical pathway of nitric oxide production. So the protein arginine oxidation through NOS, which is nitric oxide synthesis, can produce nitric oxide in our body. As you can see here is oxygen here. And this process, this pathway have to have the oxygen usage to produce nitric oxide. So that's why I can say this is oxygen dependent pathway. And the exogenous pathway, when we consume high nitrate vegetables, then the nitrate can convert into nitrite, which is NO2. In the mouse, we have bacterial enzyme on the tongue. It can convert, which is called nitrate reductase, which can convert nitrate to nitrite. And once they convert it to nitrite, then it can quickly go into the systemic circulation and going into the stomach. And it can also further reduce to nitric oxide by mammalian enzyme nitrite reductase. And there is no oxygen usage in this pathway. So I can say this is oxygen independent pathway because we don't need to use oxygen to produce nitric oxide. So what is the effect of nitric oxide? There are several different functions of nitric oxide for human body, but these are the effect of nitric oxide in exercise basis. Nitric oxide has play important role in vasodilation. So nitrate can relax the tone of blood vessel. So vasodilation and expand their vessel. So it regulates and it lowers blood pressure and increases the blood flow, so that it regulates tissue oxygenation. And also nitric oxide has effect on the force production. They have regulatory effect on ATP caused of force generation. So by slows the cross bridge cycling and working muscle. So if it slows the cross bridge cycling with the same amount of work and exercise, then we can use less ATP during the same exercise. So they say it has ATP it reduces ATP cost, followed by nitric oxide supplementation. And nitric oxide also has oxygen utilization efficiency. So nitric oxide improves oxidative phosphorylation efficiency by reducing the leakage of protons in the electron transport chain. So hydrogen is coming back to the electron transport chain to produce more ATP with the same amount of oxygen. So several early studies investigated the dietary nitrate supplementation and exercise. They suggest that nitrate supplementation found the improvement of some of known functions of nitric oxide. 16 studies conducted with nitrate supplementation is cut as form of beetroot juice, and 9 studies have demonstrated that nitrate supplementation reduces cost of oxygen during endurance exercise. This means they use less oxygen during same exercise. And 3 studies already shown that nitrate improves the performance, exercise performance, which is cycling and lowering time trial performance. They shorten the finish time after nitrate supplementation. So 3 studies have shown that nitrate supplementation improves exercise tolerance and muscle oxygenation during hypoxic conditions or severe environment. As I said before, the classical pathway of nitric oxide production is oxygen dependent. So if the classical pathway of nitric oxide performs really poorly during severe and hypoxic condition, then it can, the nitrate to nitric oxide conversion is covered in this process during hypoxic and extreme environment. So one study has demonstrated that nitrate enhances exercise performance in peripheral arterial disease patients in clinical basis. So this is one of the example of previous study. The Bailey et al. Conducted a study with 8 healthy males, and they did cycle exercise on cycloergometer. Each subject consumed half liter of beetroot juice, which contains 5.5 millimole a day of inorganic nitrate, or placebo juice for 6 days. And their dependent variables were the plasma nitrite level to see if it's possible for nitrate conversion to nitrite, and blood pressure, and also rate of oxygen consumption. So their outcome was shown that the plasma nitrate was elevated by 96% against placebo, and systolic blood pressure was significantly reduced after nitrate supplementation, but not in diastolic and mean arterial pressure. And the cost of oxygen consumption was improved. They used 19% less oxygen against placebo during the same amount of moderate intensity work rate. So the exercise tolerance was increased because the time to exhaustion was increased with the beetroot juice is about 40 seconds versus 33 seconds. They did exercise 7 seconds more than placebo viewers during severe intensity exercise. This is another example of the study by Lansley et al. In 2011. They did the cycle time trial performances. 9 competitive cyclists performed the cycle ergometer time to exhaustion trial during 4 kilometer and 16.1 kilometer. They use acute bottle of beetroot juice supplementation. It's only 1 bottle of 500 milliliter of beetroot juice or placebo juice. Each subject consumed 2.5 hours before the actual exercise testing. And the dependent variables were also plasma nitrate level and blood pressure, rate of oxygen consumption, and time trial. So the plasma nitrate was elevated by 138% with acute dose of beetroot juice supplementation. And also systolic blood pressure was reduced, but not in diastolic and mean arterial pressure. There was no differences in rate of oxygen consumption after acute bout of beetroot juice supplementation. And the time trial was improved after beetroot juice supplementation, about 2.8% and 2.7% in 4 kilometer and 16.1 kilometer time trial performance. So, but there is not the exact mechanisms behind this beneficial effect of exercise economy and exercise performance is unknown. So, but there is two possible mechanisms behind this process. So if the nitric oxide derived from the beetroot juice supplementation can reduce the proton leakage on the electron transport chain, it can produce more ATP with same amount of oxygen. So it causes increased oxidative phosphorylation efficiency, then eventually the increased mitochondrial efficiency. Or, and I don't know, so if nitric oxide derived from nitrate supplementation can be the slows post-bridge cycling and use less ATP, then it can cause the muscle phosphoprotein utilization decrease, and total ATP turnover rate will be reduced. So finally, it can increase muscle contractile efficiency itself. So during exercise, we can use less ATP with same set amount of work. But this is unclear whether one of them or both of them are possible source of increase in exercise economy and performance. So I was thinking, if the nitric oxide production derived from beetroot juice supplementation improve the exercise economy and performance followed by this mechanism, and I was thinking the nitrate supplementation could result in slower the rate of fatigue, because we can use less ATP, so we can save the ATP and we can use for later for the other exercise movements. And there was no information about beetroot juice supplementation on strength and resistance exercise. So the purpose of this study is to examine if the acute bout of beetroot juice supplementation enhances resistance exercise, especially the rate of muscle fatigue, as measured by knee extension torque generation and work rate and work fatigue. So the first hypothesis was that the rate of fatigue is measured by torque generation over the number of contraction, and the work over the number of contraction will be significantly lower with beetroot juice in a knee extension exercise. And also blood pressure, the following beetroot juice supplementation will be significantly lower before and after exercise. So 35 recreationally and habitually active others were participated in this study. They were given written informed consent and Acute, and they did medical history questionnaire to see and screen if they have the lowering injury history or some other dysfunction. And they were provided food frequency questionnaire to see and screen the usual diet habit. And they were asked to refrain from consumption of high nitrate vegetables 48 hours prior to the first testing until the finish of testing. The list of high nitrate vegetables will be shown in next slide. And the subjects were excluded if they have a form of knee problem or they have injury history of lower leg, lower limb, and they were excluded if they're not able to recruit their maximum effort of knee extension exercise, and also they were not participating in this study if they cannot follow through with the the dietary protocols. And also if they have been consuming more than 600 milligram of nitrate, then they were excluded. And I can find out with the food frequency questionnaire. So they were required to not use antibacterial mouthwash and chewing gum 48 hours before each testing session, because the bacteria is really critical and really important point in this study. So those products can kill those bacteria in our mouths. So this is a list of vegetables high in nitrate content. Yeah, there are several different vegetables in here, but usually, mostly the very bottom box, which is with red highlighted. Celery and lettuce, red beetroot, the spinach has really high in nitrate content. So I was asked the subject to not eat those kind of beverages, those kind of vegetables during whole through the experiment. This study is a placebo-controlled, double-blind, and crossover study. And an independent variable were beetroot juice and placebo beverages. And dependent variables were the rate of fatigue by torque generation, and rate of fatigue by work for each contraction and blood pressure. Each subject performed isokinetic knee extension exercise with their dominant leg. They can choose either left leg or right leg as dominant leg. But 35 subjects choose their right leg. And they were asked to come to 3 times to the laboratory to do 1 familiarization session and the 2 actual testing sessions. Each subject is 50 maximum effort concentric knee extension at 90 degrees per second on the Biodex system 3. And their range of motion was 80. The maximum extension was 15 degree to 95 of flexion. I will show the picture in the next slide. And maximum voluntary contraction of extension was followed by passive knee flexion was occurred. So I asked them kick as hard as they can until the highest point of 15 degree, and then when they reach the highest point, then completely relax their knee to the passive knee flexion. And peak torque for each repetition was measured automatically by the Biodex system, and I need to calculate the work value for now, so that's why I'm analyzing the work value for now. And the change in peak torque generated over the number of contraction was used as fatigue index. So I separate the 50 contraction was separated by 10 stages, with averaged by 5 consecutive contractions. So the first 5 contractions could be the first stage, and so 1 to 5. So up to 50 the 50 contraction. So 46 to 50 contraction could be the last stage, stage 10. And then I expressed as a percentage of the first 5 contractions. Yeah, this is a picture of Biodex device, and this is one of my some participants. This is range of motion. The maximum extension was 15 degrees, and maximum flexion was 95 degrees. So between them is the 80 degree here, ROM. And subjects were seated on the chair, and the chair's depth and height was measured and adjusted for each subject to match each subject's size of body. And subjects were secured to the Biodex device and strapped by 4 different bands. And here's 2 shoulder bands and 1 waist band here and 1 leg band. And it can limit the movement, upper body and pelvis movement. And this ensured to isolate the muscle and testing muscle group and avoid upper body and pelvis involvement to the torque generation. And this is picture of knee, and each subject was seated on a chair, and their lateral epicondyle femur was visually aligned to the axis of rotation of Biodex device. This is the red line is the axis of rotation. So the subject knee joint position was visually aligned to the center of rotation. This is view from above, this is view from front. Yeah, left and knee. And blood pressure was measured on left arm brachial artery during 2 actual testing sessions, just before exercise and just after exercise. And mean arterial pressure was calculated following this formula. This is supplementation protocol. Each subject consumed 2 bottles of 140 milliliter of either beetroot juice or placebo. Yeah, let's go on this. This is exercise of beetroot juice. This is 1 bottle is 70 milliliter. So they have to drink the 2 bottles of either beetroot juice or placebo for each testing session. So the first bottle could be drank 12 hours before, and the second bottle was drank at 2.5 hours before the exercise testing. The 2 bottles of beetroot juice providing 8 millimole per day of inorganic nitrate, and beetroot juice, placebo beverage is made by blackcurrant beverage, and there was additional sugar, syrup, and protein powder were included to match the calorie level and the same protein level. And those beverages were randomly given to the subject as a double-blind study. So one of my co-investigators that put those beverages in the brown opaque lunch bag, and he wrote the subject number and trial number, and he passed me to the lunch bags, and then I passed to the subject. So it made double-blind study. There was 72 hours washout and recovery period between 2 testing sessions. And this is exactly what it looks like. One of them is actual beetroot juice like this, and one of them is placebo beverages here. I use really same identical opaque bottle. I mean, exterior is completely same, even it has sealed cap. So nobody knows which was which, because the exterior is the same and already sealed. So I made placebo beverage with blackcurrant juice, which is commercially available. I bought this from Kroger, and protein powder from Walmart, and sugar syrup. I made sugar syrup with the table sugar. So once he made the placebo beverages, once one of my co-investigators put those beverages in this lunch bag, and then I sent them, and I passed them into my subject. So this is schematic illustration of the crossover design. And this color, this is the exercise testing session. And here is the beetroot juice or placebo supplementation. They did pre-test. Pre-test is for the familiarized to the device. They did only up to 15 to 20 contractions of fatiguing exercise. So they need to have 2 days of recovery. And during actual session, subjects were drank the first bottle 12 hours before the exercise testing and 2.5 hours before the exercise testing. And I usually sent them a text message, this is time to drink, and they have to drink right now. And then they had 3 days of workout and recovery period. And then the same process was repeated to the second actual testing. And blood pressure was, once subject will reach the laboratory and sit on a chair, and then they took the 10 minutes of resting and then take blood pressure. And then they did 50 contractions of fatiguing exercise, and then just after exercise they took blood pressure. So data were exported from Biodex device directly, and they were analyzed in Excel. Pair tests were applied to assess the differences between two beverages, and the rate of fatigue at multiple stages with 2 different beverages were analyzed by a repeated measure 2 and above. So the significance level was accepted when p-value was less than 0.05. and they are expressed as a mean plus minus standard deviation. So yeah, here are some results, and this is subject characteristics. 35 male and female subjects were participating in this study. The mean age was 24, and actual range was 19 to 36. So mean height was 174.5 centimeter, and the mean weight was 71.8 kilogram. Oops. This result shows the no significant difference between beetroot juice and placebo in the mean single highest torque value across 35 subjects. So the peak torque, they are about the same between beetroot juice and placebo. 186.7 Newton meter with beetroot juice and 187.6 Newton meter with placebo. Their difference is just 0.6% differences. So there's completely not different. And this is graph of rate of fatigue by torque generation over the number of stages. So fatigue was calculated by changing peak torque over stages, and they express it as percentage, but this is not the rate of fatigue. Rate of fatigue percentage is I express with the strength remaining. So this is percentage of first 5. So the first stage, it could be they remain their strength on 100% in their leg. So at the end of the exercise, at the stage 10, strength remaining is about 48%. So I can say there is 52% of rate of fatigue by torque generation. Oops. The blue line is beetroot juice, and red line is with placebo beverages. Yeah, between two beverages there were no differences. The largest gap was only 1.3% at the last stage. This is results for blood pressure. The resting blood pressure was no significant difference between two beverages. And post-exercise, diastolic blood pressure and mean arterial pressure were increased with beetroot juice supplementation, which is against to my hypothesis, which is blood pressure will reduce after beetroot juice supplementation. So, yeah, the A is the diastolic blood pressure and B is mean arterial pressure. Both of them have higher number with beetroot juice supplementation. So overall, there was no significant difference between two beverages in rate of fatigue by torque generation. And the rate of fatigue with work value will be determined soon. And there was no significant difference between two beverages in peak torque. And resting blood pressure was no different. And after fatiguing exercise, diastolic blood pressure and mean arterial blood pressure were both increased with beetroot juice supplementation. So, yeah, this is it. And I hope I can get a better result with the work value. I'm not really sure so far. So, this is for today's presentation. These are my references. Yeah, this is really. I took a little shorter time than I expected. When I'm preparing and practicing, I was measured 45 minutes. But I was trying to finish really early. So I'll be more happy with this. Any suggestions or comments, but not in question.
Let me start with one question here. How many people here in here participate in this study? Okay. So about 5 or 6 of you, okay. All right, so go ahead.
Sometimes when we look at mean values, it sometimes washes information out. Did you have some people that improved with the beetroot juice and others didn't? Was
Yeah, it's about half and half. So, but the gap is different. So I was thinking the gap between beetroot juice and placebo. Some of people has higher peak torque with placebo, and some people had higher peak torque with beetroot juice. It's just random, really. It was really random. So.
was there any way to explain the differences between those groups? Maybe between the men and the women, or between people that were more highly trained, or do you see any kind of trend?
So I didn't look at it. So.
I don't think it's been explored like that.
Yeah, but from this result, I think it was really randomly older, not older, randomly. Yeah. Yes.
Right?
I was going to say, so some of your literature showed there were differences with beetroot juice, but your study suggests not. I was just wondering about your exercise protocols. They did 50 maximal contractions, whereas the literature was using like cycle ergometer. So I wonder, what's your interpretation on the intensity of the exercise perhaps having an effect here, and whether you see an effect in beetroot juice? How long did it take them to do the 50 contractions?
How long?
Yeah.
Usually they take me 2.5 minutes. Yeah, so it was in prepared study. I did it for. I tried to see how if the rate of fatigue is occurred after 50 contractions of 90 degrees per second. So they showed completely really high in rate of fatigue. So I just applied the 50 contractions of.
I think his question, Seungyong, is relating more to your activity is maximum effort activity. Most of the endurance type of activity is submaximal effort. So the question is, since you're doing maximum effort, is this different in the fact, and the time interval as well, but it's maximum effort versus submaximal effort. So what kind of role? So I mean, how can you justify what protocol you used versus say the previous protocol you've been using? You guys see this? This is stuff that gets asked during thesis defense questions, okay? Do you really understand the physiology that's going on, okay? So what you have to get back to is what are the two different theories of how this may be working. So the theory of is it oxygen dependent?
Independent or muscle control? I know it's really a hard question for me really. Because this experiment was first study with the resistance exercise. So I want to try to test if the muscle contractile efficiency is a possible source of beetroot supplementation.
So what you're basically saying is this protocol was designed more to test the not the proton leakage theory, but it was more designed to test whether or not there's any changes in muscle efficiency relative to the myosin head contractions. Okay? So that's kind of what this protocol is, and so the potential is if there was some change in the mechanical efficiency, that it might manifest itself in terms of showing that we're gonna get more total work done, as opposed to being, most of the early work was derived just on, at submaximal efforts, you use less oxygen. So the question there, why is going on? So some people propose it's actually because you're using less ATP in the myosin heads, as opposed to other people proposing that it has to do with mitochondrial efficiency in terms of the proton leakage. So nobody's really ever done anything relative to the muscular effort. So I understand your questions, and we could have maybe gone with something like holding a submaximal effort to exhaustion. I've done some work like that where you maybe hold 40% to exhaustion and see whether or not that would go longer. That's another way to approach it. It might be another thesis project down the line if somebody else is interested in that kind of stuff.
Question about your placebo. So you use that black currant, correct?
Yes.
So I guess what's in the placebo, and would that placebo have a greater effect than your nitrates? Because if you look at the data, it's lower blood pressure.
Yep.
If you compare the nitrate compared to the placebo.
From the previous study?
Yeah, as well. Nitrate, every time I read the literature, nitrate lowers blood pressure.
Yeah.
So, then you show that the placebo had lower blood pressure, which one interpretation is nitrates increasing the blood pressure, but it could be what's in your placebo. Is there anything inert? Is it inert, your placebo, or is there something in your placebo that could actually be reducing blood pressure more?
Yeah, I'm looking at it because several previous studies used blackcurrant juice as a placebo or the nitrate depletion beetroot juice as a placebo beverage. But that's really expensive to buy for the non-funding study, to buy the nitrate depletion beetroot juice. That's exactly same beetroot juice, but there's no nitrate on it. Several studies use this as placebo, but I used blackcurrant juice followed through the other studies. But I found some information of blackcurrant juice after their collection. And the blackcurrant juice can act as an antioxidant. They have the vitamin C and the other source too. It might, I'm thinking, maybe it may affect on blood pressure and or the exercise protocol. That's what I'm thinking earlier.
I know if you infuse vitamin C acutely, you could reduce blood pressure. So do you think your black currant is actually more effective than your nitrate treatment?
No, I think there's a whole lot of limitations because I control the participants' dietary habit of during or 1 week experiment period, but
How much what was the difference in terms of millimeters of mercury, in terms of blood pressure? It's hard to tell from this diagram. What was it?
it was about 2. The numerical value was not really different, but the statistical differences. So it was about 1 to 2.5 millimeter of
Millimeters of mercury.
yeah 1 to 2.5.
Travis, you want to address that question? You have a little more feel for this, or do you know? Dr. Tom?
As far as the blackcurrant, possibly antioxidant effect, you may want to look into other micronutrients associated with blackcurrant, just to have some literature to back that up.
I mean, basically, we matched the carbohydrate content and the protein content, okay? So that was, and blackcurrant juice has no nitrates in it?
No.
Okay, so no nitrates. So what we try to get is a placebo that the basic difference was nitrates. Now, whether or not there's something else in there that caused this, I'm at the point where I'm kind of pretty much just dismissing that, okay? That's the kind of way I feel about it. So sometimes you have such statistically significant findings that maybe aren't physiologically significant, so, I mean, based on, when you go back to the graphs, go back to the graphs. I mean, we've looked at different ways of trying to look at these data, and it's like, I mean, you know, one of the things I try to teach my students, and the same thing with both Grant and Seungyong here, I said, the first thing you do is graph it out. You know, don't worry about running statistics, just graph it. And when you do that graph, what do you see? Pretty easy to see. So, so from that regard, I think we've answered that particular question. I don't know about the blood pressure stuff. Okay, so I mean, it's an interesting thing to go and shows you where you need to go. You definitely need to do some investigation in terms of what content black currant juice has in it, whether or not there's anything in there that may affect blood pressure. That's a good question. You need to be ready to respond to that.
Did you measure blood levels of nitric oxide, or
No, I didn't.
have any other studies done that?
Yeah, every several study, several previous study measured the plasma nitrate level, but like following the several studies and previous study, they did only the 5 to 6 millimole of the inorganic nitrate. So even though I didn't measure the plasma nitrite level, but I can possibly assume that if each subject consumed 8 millimole of nitrate, then it can possibly increase the plasma nitrite level. That was my guess. So
Okay,
I don't know.
so it's a very good question. And so because this was a non-funded study, okay, meaning Seungyong funded the study for the beetroot juice himself, okay? Because we would have to draw blood samples and send them off to get them measured, we didn't measure. So it's a so what you have to say, Seungyong, it's a limitation of the study, but based on the literature that we've read, a number of different studies, some of which done longer phase supplementation for like 5 or 6 days, but there's at least a couple studies that have done acute phasing, and every one of those have shown plasma nitrates to increase significantly. So our assumption is that the plasma nitrates follow the same trend, but we can't say for sure exactly how much there will be without. Go ahead, Jason.
Does the nitrate build up in the muscle? I'm just thinking because you had only one set. Perhaps there was like a blood flow restriction or something with the exercise. So if it doesn't build up in the muscle, do you think you might have seen something different if you had done, given some rest periods in between, or done a couple sets of that protocol?
Where's nitrates having its effect? That's why.
Where?
Where?
Where nitrate effect on the muscle?
Yeah, where, I mean, 2 different places that may have its effect, right?
Yeah, on the muscle, and especially in the cross-bridge cycling.
Well, that's one, and the other one is,
Mitochondria in electron transport chains, and can lift up, reduce the leakage of proton in electron transport chain to produce more ATP.
I guess what I'm asking is it something that's taken up by the skeletal muscle at rest, or is it more similar to oxygen that's just taken in when it's needed?
I mean, no study was conducted with nitrate in the resting state, and they only did the endurance exercise, and so I don't know exactly how it can affect on the muscle during resting session.
So,
I think we don't have a clue, Jason.
All right.
I mean, that's a good question. I don't know, I mean, whether or not, I mean, that's one of the difficult things in designing a study like this is, well, do we need to do a 6-day supplementation because, it's going to accumulate in the muscle? I mean, we think most of this there's probably an acute effect relative to blood flow and other things. So I don't know the answer to the question.
So I can't speak to the acute treatment, but in more chronic treatment, 3-week treatment with sodium nitrites downstream, you do see increased nitrite levels within arteries. So it probably does accumulate within the muscle, I would say. But acutely, like what you did, I doubt it accumulates within the tissue itself.
See how, yes, so you students see how this begins to work as people that have different expertise. We pull together teams because people have different expertise like this and know different things. And so, not one of us knows all this. And so we try to accumulate our expertise. And we have a late addition here in terms of some of our expertise here. So.
I didn't see the nitrite level in action, but and the after nitrate supplementation, it will be diminished in 24 hours. That's what the previous author said. So there is not much differences between the acute bouts of beetroot juice supplementation and chronic more than 10 days of beetroot juice supplementation. So that's why I choose the acute bouts of beetroot juice.
But I mean, the question starts becoming though, when you get something that's different than the literature, that's when you have to start asking questions. Is it something that we did in our design that resulted in these differences? Or is this indeed just a different aspect of it from the fact that we did a completely different study of it? Instead of endurance type of exercise, we're doing a muscular strength or a muscular endurance exercise. So is there something different? So these are all legitimate questions that need to be asked in terms of, is there something that in our design that caused these results as opposed to this is a legitimate finding? Dr. Simons?
Hi, nice presentation. Well, I'm just wondering if maybe peak torque isn't the variable you want to be using. If you're interested in the efficiency of the muscle and the contractile efficiency, maybe rate of force development. So peak torque might be the same between the two groups, but the way they get to peak torque might be different.
Well, I don't know if we can get that off the Biodex. I don't think the Biodex has enough force resolution to be able to, I say that for our lab method stuff, guys, okay? I don't think it samples the data fast enough. We would have to take this off in a computer and look at that. The other thing that we're going to try to look at, and we're waiting for some help from Dr. Pohl and Dr. Shapiro. We want to look at what I call the work, and I'm thinking of the total area under the curve. And so Dr. Pohl and Dr. Shapiro kept trying to convince me it's something called impulse or something. We're having to work out the mathematics of it. But for those students that don't know, when you see what happens is we get a curve that looks like this for one contraction. And basically what we want to do is find out what the total area under here is. So as we begin to fatigue over a period of time, is it maybe that's not just a peak torque that's going down, but maybe the total area is going down. So that's another one that we're trying to look at. We haven't just quite figured out exactly how to calculate that yet. So that's the part that he was talking about that we haven't done yet.
In your research review of all the literature, have you found any negative effects of nitric oxide? Any adverse effects? Any studies talking about that?
There were some other studies with the risk of nitrate consumption, but usually the risk of nitrates came from the processed meat and the water, but not in vegetables. So the nitrate from vegetables can be the good source in human body. But I didn't found any other risk factor of nitrate supplementation previously.
But most of that's relative to cancer as far as I see. So I don't know about it. Okay, any other questions? All right, thanks, that's one.